morning, everyone, and welcome into this day with the Quimper Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. Whoever you are, wherever you're from, whomever you love, and whatever your faith tradition, you are welcome here. My name is Susan Pratt, and I am a member here at QUUF. I'd like to begin this service by acknowledging that the water, land, and shorelines here in Port Townsend are the traditional territory of the S'Klallam and Chimicum peoples. We honor and acknowledge our Indigenous members and neighbors and vow to help restore and sustain their homelands. As we call in our time together, let us settle our minds and calm our hearts with the ringing of our chime. It is good to be together. Please join us now in our call to community, hymn number 128, For All That Is Our Life, led by Pat and Doug Rogers.
For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad. For needs which others serve, for services we give, for work and its rewards, for hours of rest and love, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life. For sorrows we must bear, for failures, pain, and loss, for each new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life. For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad.
Thank you, Pat and Doug. Please join now in our chalice lighting words. They were written by Bruce Southworth. For the gift of this day and for our community of spiritual nurture and compassion, we give thanks. We light this chalice as a symbol of our faith. May our many sparks meet and merge in communion of heart and soul. For the gift of this day and our community of spiritual nurture and compassion, we give thanks. We light this chalice as a symbol of our faith. May our sparks meet and merge in communion of heart and soul.
Our opening words this morning are by E.E. Cummings. I thank you, God, for most this amazing day, for the leaping greenly spirits of trees and a blue, true dream of sky, and for everything which is natural, which is infinite, which is yes. I who have died am alive again today, and this is the sun's birthday. This is the birthday of life and of love and wings and of the gay, great happening, illimitably earth. How should tasting, touching, hearing, seeing, breathing, any, lifted from the know of all nothing, human merely being, doubt unimaginable you? Now the ears of my ears awake, and now the eyes of my eyes are opened.
Thank you, Kees. What we'd like to do now is acknowledge and welcome those of you who are visiting us this morning. If you are online with us, you are invited to say hello in the comments section and tell us your name and where you're from. The chat section can be found below or on the right-hand side of the video when it is out of full screen. If you are attending in person, introduce yourself to your neighbors after the service. Either way, we would love to hear from you. So, welcome everyone. We're glad you're with us today. Next Sunday, September 11th, is our homecoming service. And we will be starting our in-person live services and religious education programs. If you are unable to attend, we will still be offering YouTube services at 10 a.m. We will now receive the offering, which today goes to support our programming, staff, and building here at QUUF. If you would like to donate today, you have three options. Text the amount you'd like to give to the number now showing at the bottom of the screen, or go to our website, QUUF.org, and click on the giving link, or simply mail a check to QUUF. Just remember to write offering in the memo line. We will now gratefully receive your offering as we listen to Charlie King's version of the John Lennon classic, Imagine.
Imagine you have health care. It's easy if you try. Freedom to choose your doctor. Coverage money can't buy. Imagine first-class treatment when you're unemployed. Imagine no insurance, no greedy middleman, no premium, no copay, a single payer plan. Imagine a long illness and you don't lose your home. You may say I'm a dreamer. I'm not dreaming by myself. I hope someday you'll join us and the world will live in health. Can you say universal? I wonder if you can. Now try comprehensive. Does this sound like a plan? It's worked for years in Europe, Canada, and Japan. You may say I'm a dreamer. I'm not dreaming by myself. I hope someday we'll join them and the world will live in health.
Thank you, Charlie King. We will now share our joys and sorrows, recognizing that our personal joys and sorrows are only a fragment of the joys and sorrows of the larger community of life. And thus, we place this first stone thinking in particular of the tens of millions of Americans who do not have access to adequate health care, and especially women who lack access to safe abortions. And now, within our congregation, we light a candle of joy for the folks who organized and volunteered to make the book sale happen this past weekend. And we light a candle of joy for all the staff and volunteers and the work they are doing to prepare for in-person services resuming. And now we place a final stone, holding in our hearts the joys and sorrows I've just shared, but also thinking of such joys and sorrows among us that are unexpressed but of no less importance. I invite you now into a moment of silence.
I have 3 readings for today. The first is by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Quote, "Of all the forms of inequality, injustice in healthcare is the most shocking and inhumane." End quote. The second reading is by Dr. John Guyman, a professor emeritus of family medicine at the University of Washington School of Medicine. This is from one of his many books titled, quote, "Common Sense, the Case for and Against Medicare for All, Leading Issue in the 2020 Elections." It is still relevant today. Quote, "We should all be asking these 4 basic questions which need answers. 1, who is the healthcare system for? Is it for patients and families, or corporate stakeholders in the medical industrial complex? Number 2, should healthcare services be not-for-profit or for-profit as just another commodity on an open market? Number 3, is healthcare a human right or a privilege based on ability to pay? And number 4, what ethic should prevail in healthcare? A business ethic maximizing revenue to the industry, or a service ethic based on needs of patients and families? He goes on to say, most advanced countries around the world answered these questions many years ago. The U.S. remains an outlier. Healthcare was recognized as a human right way back in 1948, when the General Assembly of the United Nations adopted its Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This was also later adopted by the World Health Organization in its Declaration of the Rights of Patients. The third reading is part of the summary from the congress.gov website of the Medicare for All Act of 2021. It was introduced in the House of Representatives by Representative Pramila Jayapal, Democrat from the 7th District of Washington State, as House Bill number 1976. Quote, This bill establishes a national health insurance program that is administered by the Department of Health and Human Services. Among other requirements, the program must, 1, cover all U.S. residents, 2, provide for automatic enrollment of individuals upon birth or residency in the United States, and 3, cover items and services that are medically necessary or appropriate to maintain health or to diagnose, treat, or rehabilitate a health condition, including hospital services, prescription drugs, mental health and substance abuse treatment, dental and vision services, and long-term care. Does this sound a bit like what Charlie King described in his song, Imagine Healthcare? We need a bridge over troubled waters to get us there. Here is one written into a song by Simon and Garfunkel, performed by John Legend.
When you're weary and feeling small, when tears are in your eyes, I will dry them all. I'm on your side. Oh, when times get rough and friends just can't be found like a bridge over troubled water. I will lay me down like a bridge over troubled water. I will lay me down. When you're down and out, when you're on the street, when evening falls so hard, I will comfort you. I'll take your part. When darkness comes and pain is all around, like a bridge over troubled water, I will lay me down like a bridge over troubled water. I will lay me down.
Our speaker today is Kees Kolff. Kees was born in the Netherlands, but has lived in the United States since the age of 5. He is a pediatrician and public health professional by training and briefly worked for the Centers for Disease Control. He served as family physician and the medical director of the Seymour Community Health Centers when it first started in Seattle in 1978. In 1995, he and his wife Helen spent a year doing mostly environmental work in Peru. They moved to the Olympic Peninsula in 1997, joined QUUF, and founded the Port Townsend Eco Village, where they now live with 27 other adults, 9 children, several dozen chickens, and about 50,000 honeybees. Kees is currently in his second term on the board of Jefferson Healthcare, our public hospital district, as well as on the local Board of Health.
Thank you, Susan. The provision of reproductive health services at one end of life and the support for end-of-life choices at the other is increasingly under threat in our country. I would like to share with you some stories from my personal life as both a recipient and a provider of health care, and place them into the broader context of the current healthcare crisis. I will also suggest things we can actually do that can make a difference. I want to thank Reverend Bruce Bodie for encouraging me to focus on personal stories, and should also add that the views I express today are my own and not necessarily those of the boards on which I serve. Let me start at the beginning, my birth. I was born on May 31st, 1945, at home in Quimper, a small town in the Netherlands, on a special, slightly elevated bed that the visiting nurses had brought a week earlier. The midwife actually arrived on time for me, but not for the birth of my older siblings, born during the Nazi occupation when there were many imposed curfews. When I asked my mother how she got me to sleep through the night soon after I was born, she said she had no idea, and it must have been the frequently visiting home health nurse that got me to do it. Though I didn't realize it at the time, I was the beneficiary of a superb healthcare system. My very favorite uncle was Ohm Terrace, one of my father's 4 brothers. He, like my paternal grandfather and my father, had become physician. He was a large, gentle family practitioner in the small Dutch farm town of Marsum. His wife, Altje, was the daughter of a local farmer and served as the pharmacist for the community. The pharmacy was located in their large farmhouse, as was my uncle's office and exam room. His claim to local fame was that he had delivered quadruplets in a farmhouse, and they all did well. I relish the memory of walking down the street with him when I was a young physician, as he greeted local residents and spoke compassionately about their lives. He treated everyone who needed care. Having physicians care for patients as he did was definitely not restricted to the Netherlands, however. I know of many physicians in this country as well, who, in spite of our fractured healthcare system, have been equally compassionate in the communities where they live. My father invented the artificial kidney in the Netherlands during the Second World War, and he believed in treating everyone who needed care. The first 10 patients, unfortunately, whom he tried to treat on his artificial kidney did not survive. The 11th, however, who did survive was a Nazi sympathizer, much to the dismay of her husband and many others. The first thing she said when she came out of the coma caused by her temporary renal failure was, "I'm going to divorce my husband." In 1950, when I was 5, my father accepted a position at the Cleveland Clinic. He developed a new artificial kidney model, but still used the same technique of running blood through a long tube of semi-permeable cellophane. In the Netherlands, he had used the lining of pig intestines intended for sausages. The membrane allows urea and other toxins to escape into a water bath In this case, what he used was an old washing machine tub just to save on costs. I can still remember being in our basement, turning the crank on the wooden contraption that wound the coils of cellophane around an empty beer can for the prototypes that would become known as the twin-coil kidney. Maytag later refused to use their washing machines, fearing liability costs. When Baxter Laboratories bought the patent, my father turned down the offer to receive a penny for every disposable coil sold. He believed that medicine was not for personal profit. I've occasionally wondered what the financial result might have been. When I was about 10, I continued to have temper tantrums to the point that my parents consulted a psychiatrist. He suggested two things. First, that I be given a drum set so I could vent some of my emotions physically without attacking others. The second was that maybe as the fourth of 5 children, I couldn't find my role in the family and that it might help if my mother could support me in a hobby. We started a nature collection, and my bedroom soon became a museum with butterflies, fossils, stuffed birds, shells, and other things. When on a camping trip, we tacked a smelly, 4-foot-long roadkill snakeskin under the camping trailer, my siblings were not pleased. I personally think the hobby, more than the drum set, helped. The temper tantrums became less frequent, except for recently, when I think about the healthcare system in this country. When it came to choosing a career, I was drawn to the field of medicine in part because of the wonders of human biology. My father was initially disappointed that I also devoted time to getting a master's in public health, because he didn't think it would be as challenging as was his field of internal medicine. Years later, he apologized for not being enthusiastic about my choice. If he were alive today, 2.5 years into the coronavirus pandemic, I think he would have a greater appreciation for the challenges in the field of public health. My high school graduation speech was inspired by the profound difference between healthcare in the U.S. compared to that in the Netherlands. The Dutch healthcare system in 2020 was ranked number 3 in the World Index of Healthcare Innovation, just behind Switzerland and Germany. The system guarantees access to all, regardless of ability to pay. There's a cartoon in my high school yearbook of me giving my speech about universal health care while a cloaked man with a dagger threatens me from behind. The letters AMA are printed on his cape. The American Medical Association has consistently blocked all attempts at developing a universal health care system in the U.S., of which there have been many attempts, a dozen or so perhaps, since 1910. 3 years after that speech, during my junior year of college in Paris, I again benefited from free universal health care when I needed antibiotics for pneumonia. During a 2-year fellowship at the University of Washington, I became involved with the Chilean Refugee Resettlement Program, which was hosting Chileans who had been imprisoned by the Pinochet dictatorship right after the U.S.-supported Allende coup in Chile. The U.S. healthcare system had no organized way to offer them care, so I saw some of them in the emergency rooms and in a variety of clinics. This led me to apply for and become the medical director of CMAR Community Health Centers in 1978. CMAR had just received a grant from the federal government because they had shown that the Hispanic population in Seattle was underserved. It became part of a safety net of over 500 community and migrant health centers around the country that provide health care to anyone with a sliding fee scale based on ability to pay. CMAR satisfied my desire to work in an organization that provided secular, universal health care, and it now has clinics throughout Western Washington. After I left CMAR in 1995, my wife Helen and I lived in a small town in the Peruvian Andes for a year in order to volunteer primarily on environmental projects. We had become seriously concerned about global warming and how the worsening environment was negatively affecting life on this planet. However, the local national park authorities found out that I was a physician and that Helen was formerly an educator with Planned Parenthood. They asked us to teach classes on pregnancy prevention to the park rangers and their wives who lived in the very small village at the main entrance to Huascarán National Park. It was a very strange and secular experience for me to be in a circle with Peruvian men explaining what vasectomies were and that the government in their Catholic country was offering them free of charge. After a year of living in a small town in the Peruvian Andes without a car, refrigerator, or washing machine, my wife Helen and I decided, while in culture shock from our return to Seattle, to move to the small town of Port Townsend. We bought a place which eventually became the Port Townsend Eco Village, walked down the street to the newly constructed QUUF church, the current fellowship hall. We were immediately drawn to the people and to the 7 principles of Unitarian Universalism. My parents moved to Port Townsend with us in 1997. They believed in the right to end their own lives when they thought it was the right time to do so. They had even practiced what the Hemlock Society, now called Compassion and Choices, recommended with the use of a self-administered plastic bag and helium. In addition, my father had procured a sizable quantity of Seconal, a short-acting barbiturate, as an alternative way to end his life. When he was moved into a nursing-supervised wing of an assisted living facility at age 95, he was very upset that he was not able to keep his Seconal in his personal medicine cabinet rather than at the nurse's station. He continued to lose his short-term memory and eventually could no longer remember the plans he had considered earlier. My mother, on the other hand, was more proactive about her death. When she was 92, she fell and injured her hip and her back. She had previously had very successful hip replacement at Jefferson Healthcare 9 years earlier and only 10 days after she moved to Port Townsend. This time, however, she decided she had lived a good life long enough and wanted no more surgeries. She chose to voluntarily stop eating and drinking, a choice known as VSED. She went on hospice, and Jefferson Healthcare supported the concept of terminal sedation, in which enough pain medication is made available to provide comfort, even if it might shorten someone's life. She died comfortably at home. In 2008, Washington state voters approved the Death with Dignity Act, which allows physicians to write for lethal doses of medications for terminally ill patients under very specific guidelines. Several of my friends have gone through this process. The policies and providers at Jefferson Healthcare support all patient choices at both ends of life. Jefferson Healthcare is one of 49 public hospital districts in Washington state. Voters elect the 5 commissioners on the board, who are responsible for making all policy and governance decisions, and hire 1 employee who is responsible for all administrative and operational decisions. That person for 30 years here was Vic Dirksen, and for the past 10 years or so has been Mike Glenn. Our hospital district is a complete healthcare system with a hospital, a pharmacy, hospice and home health services, and many specialty and primary care clinics, some as far south as Port Ludlow and Quilcene. The preamble in our board book of bylaws and guidelines best describes why we exist. Quote, "The purpose of Jefferson County Public Hospital District Number 2, DBA Jefferson Healthcare, is to foster a healthier community by working to assure all residents have access to high-quality health care services they need while maintaining a healthy, locally controlled, financially sustainable organization," end quote. This is an enormous challenge. In 2014, the League of Women Voters held a forum in Port Townsend regarding the ethical and religious directives, ERDs, for Catholic healthcare services. Mike Glenn attended and stated his commitment to providing secular health care in Jefferson County. The former CEO of the former Harrison Hospital, formerly located in Bremerton, said, quote, "If you aren't worried about the future of small, rural hospitals, you should be," end quote. Several years later, Harrison Hospital was bought by CHI Franciscan, was renamed St. Michael's, and was moved to Silverdale. More than 200 rural hospitals have closed in the U.S. since 2005, and more than 50 of those in the past 3 years. Here in Washington State, however, hospitals are being purchased rather than closing. Enumclaw, Tukwila, and many other communities have all lost local control of their healthcare services. Roughly 42% of hospital beds in Washington State are now owned by Catholic organizations. And the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, in their 2018 sixth edition to the ERDs, ERDSs, strengthened the language for bishops to close loopholes in any arrangements that might allow the offering of, quote, immoral procedures, end quote. In January of this year, people from Kitsap County group Save Secular Healthcare Washington came to Port Townsend to ring the alarm. I reassured the hosting PT Indivisible group that the hospital district is committed to remaining independent and to providing secular health care. Several weeks ago, the Board of Health passed a resolution, quote, declaring reproductive choice, including abortion access, a basic human right, end quote. Key leadership staff from Jefferson Healthcare, including physicians, attended to express their commitment to assure that abortion services remain locally available. Last weekend, Susan Landau gave a remarkable sermon here entitled Passionately Pro-Choice. I encourage you to listen to it if you missed it. The Jefferson Healthcare Board supports the concept of universal health care and the expansion of Medicaid and Medicare. In fact, 70% of Americans, including a majority of Republicans, support the concept of Medicare for all, as summarized in our third reading this morning. There are 10 countries that do not offer universal health care for all: Iran, Syria, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Egypt, Nigeria, Yemen, South Africa, China, and the United States. Some, like China, cover a larger percentage of their population than do we. According to the 2018 U.S. Census, 8.5% of Americans, roughly 27.5 million people, mostly people with low income and people of color, still do not have health insurance, even after the Affordable Care Act. Tens of millions more are underinsured, and medical debt is the most common cause of personal bankruptcy in this country. In Washington State, I know of only 2 hospitals that do not send patients with persistently unpaid bills to court. where wages might be garnished and credit ruined. One is Children's Hospital in Seattle, and the other is Jefferson Healthcare. We made that compassionate decision at the start of the corona pandemic. Let me give you my answers to the questions posed by Dr. Guyman in one of the readings at the beginning of this sermon. Number one, who is the healthcare system for? I believe it's for patients and families. Number two, should healthcare services be not-for-profit? Yes, I believe it is not just another commodity on an open market. Number three, is healthcare a human right? Yes, I believe it is not a privilege based on ability to pay. Number four, what ethic should prevail in healthcare? I believe it should be a service ethic based on the needs of patients and families. As the Reverend Victoria Poling stated so convincingly in a sermon here just 2 weeks ago, we should be guided by love at the center of everything we do. So here are a few things all of us can do, keeping love at the center. At the federal level, we can advocate for Medicare for all whenever possible. Charlie King's song, Imagine Healthcare, that you heard at the beginning of this service, describes a future that is possible, and House Bill 1976 is a huge step in the right direction. At the state level, please sign a petition for ballot initiative 1471 for the creation of the Washington Health Trust. It will be the first statewide, publicly financed, not-for-profit, comprehensive healthcare system in the United States and will cover all state residents. If you are attending this service in person, people from Whole Washington, a grassroots coalition of healthcare professionals and volunteers, will have a petition to sign after the service. If you are viewing this online, you can check out their website for more information and check out the Where Can I Sign button on their homepage. At the county level, here are some things we can all do. Number one, make our personal health care choices known. Advance directives and other documents are readily available from places like End of Life Washington or Jefferson Healthcare. Number two, keep up to date with vaccinations against COVID-19. The virus continues to kill mostly unvaccinated people, and the pandemic continues to stretch both the finances and the staff of our hospital district. Number three, please use our local hospital system. If we don't use it, we could lose it. Our hospital district survives primarily on revenue from the services we provide. Less than 1% of our personal property taxes goes to support the 24/7 coverage we get from the emergency room, emergency surgeries, and inpatient care, as well as other services. And finally, number four, support the expansion of local health care services. We do not need a bond for our current plans to replace an old facility and provide more space for currently needed specialty care. We may need more community support in the near future, especially to help cover the millions of dollars of discounted and free care we provide locally. In summary, I would like to end where we started, with the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., quote, "Of all the forms of inequality, injustice in healthcare is the most shocking and inhumane," end quote. The song, Lean on Me, by Bill Withers and performed by worldwide musicians playing for change, should help inspire our actions centered in love.
not strong, I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on. Oh, it won't be long. You're gonna need somebody to lean on. Please swallow your pride. If I have things you need to borrow, oh, no one can fill those are your needs that you won't let show. You just call on your brother when you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean on. You just might have a problem that you don't understand. We all need somebody to lean on. You just call on your brother when you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean on. You just might have a problem that you don't understand. We all need somebody to lean on.
If there is a load you have to bear that you can carry, I'm right up the road. I'll share your load if you just call me.
Call me. I'm right up the road. Just call me, baby. I'm right up the road. I'm a friend. Call me. Call me. I'm right up the road. You gotta call me. I'm a friend. Call me. I'll carry your load. Call me. I'll help carry your load.
Before we extinguish our chalice, I want to remind you that the Reverend Kate Kinney will be our speaker next Sunday. The title of her sermon will be Homeward Bound. I hope you can join us. And now, let us join voices in our chalice extinguishing words. We extinguish our flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, the fire of commitment, or the power of transformation. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Now let us turn our attention to Issei Barnwell and the UUA General Assembly Virtual Choir, who will perform our postlude.
For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Oh, for each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Oh, for each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are a prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust, and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth, keepers of faith, makers of peace, and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust, and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we